Hello, everyone. Ex-Walk Hill Bethelite here. And Jehovah's Witnesses have lowered their hourly requirement for a pioneer down to 50 hours. They've lowered the hourly requirement to be an auxiliary pioneer to about 30 hours. Now, you have to ask yourself this question. If Jehovah's Witnesses are God's one and only organization, why is it that they keep lowering their standards? Wouldn't their standards stay the same regardless of what's going on in the world today? Wouldn't their standards stay the same and God just give them the power beyond what is normal to overcome what's going on around them? Because look at the Bible. Anywhere in the Bible where God or Jehovah gave someone an assignment, He also gave them the ability to carry out that assignment. The person didn't have to keep changing the standard. We didn't have to keep switching things up in the Bible. So if God gave Jehovah's Witnesses the commission, right, to preach, if it wasn't just Watchtower inventing this whole thing, that God specifically told them, not just all Christianity, but God specifically told Watchtower to go out and preach the good news of the kingdom. Well, why is it then that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't equipped to handle the hourly requirements that go along with going out and preaching door to door? There was a time where the hourly requirement was 90 hours. Well, if God commissions you to go out and preach for 90 hours, then God would then give you the ability to carry that out. But what did we see happen? Watchtower lowered the requirement to, what was it, about 70 hours or so? Why? Because people couldn't do it. People could not keep up that standard. So they had to lower the standard. Well, it's happened again where people couldn't keep up, where God should be giving them the ability to carry out this preaching work on a high level. If Jehovah God told one group, Watchtower, just one group, Watchtower, to go out and preach, then they would then have the ability to carry it out at a higher level than anyone else, because He would then be giving them the ability to do what He commissioned them to do. But that's not what we're seeing, is it? We're seeing Watchtower continuously, not just once, not just twice, but continuously lower the standard of what they are going to go out and do in their preaching work. So now it's all the way down to 50 hours. Back in the day, 50 hours just meant you were an auxiliary pioneer. You weren't even a pioneer if you were out preaching 50 hours. 30 hours was just, I guess, a decent month out going door to door. You weren't any kind of pioneer at all going out 30 hours. But not only do Jehovah's Witnesses continuously change the teachings because they keep getting the teachings wrong, apparently they keep setting standards for their hourly requirements that Jehovah apparently is not giving them the ability and power to carry out. Now, you got to understand that if a pioneer is going out door to door or standing next to carts or what have you, they're not spending the 50 hours talking to people. That's 50 hours that they were just out that month. Not 50 hours continuously talking to people. So out of those 50 hours, a lot of time is spent traveling. A lot of that time is spent driving, right? Some of that time, probably a considerable amount, is spent at McDonald's, eating and talking and sitting in McDonald's. We've all seen Jehovah's Witnesses go right from the Kingdom Hall and go straight to McDonald's. Go get something to eat, go get some coffee, sit there, lounge for a while, and eventually they go out to go knock on some doors. Well, look at the big picture. Jehovah's Witnesses are just coming out of COVID, right? COVID is still here, but they're just coming out of stopping the preaching work altogether. They essentially stopped the door-to-door altogether. That lowered production. That lowered the amount of time that they were out knocking on doors, out actively talking to people. Well, after resuming that type of work, you would think they would ramp it up. Hey, we've been idle for years. God's given us this great proclamation to go out and preach the good news of the kingdom, and we've been hiding from COVID for like the last 3 or 4 years. Well, now that we're getting out here preaching, we should do it and do it big. No, they get out there and lower the requirement, lower than it's ever been. How are you going to complete the preaching work if you keep stopping the preaching work, number one, because of viruses, COVID and whatnot? You stopped it altogether, essentially. Writing letters is not interacting with people. So I'm not even counting that. Sending random letters is not interacting with anybody. That's not preaching. You're not talking to anybody. You don't even know if they read the letter, right? So Jehovah's Witnesses went from not really preaching at all for years. This great proclamation Jehovah God gave you, quote unquote, you stopped doing it. And then when you start doing it, you lower the requirements down to about nothing. Down to about nothing. 30 hours, you get a title for going out for 30 hours. You understand a lot of that time is standing next to a cart, not talking to anybody. What's going to happen to the production, right? You're supposed to be bringing people in this organization, and you are lowering and lowering and lowering your standards to be able to do so. We should be seeing the polar complete opposite. Jehovah's Witnesses, the organization Watchtower, is the polar complete opposite of anything God would have chosen and given a commission to, because their teachings keep changing, meaning they're not getting them from God. Otherwise, they would not need to keep changing the teaching. such as the generation of 1914 not passing away before the end of the world was supposed to come. That was a teaching they had, a failed teaching. They didn't get that from God. Now, they can't keep up with their own hourly requirements, and now they got to keep changing the rules. So, let's make this very clear. A pioneer was a person going out, let's say 90 hours, out in their door-to-door work. Now that they have lowered it all the way down to auxiliary pioneer hours, Watchtower cannot fool us or trick us. Basically, what happened is they just got rid of all the pioneers. Only thing they have now are people doing 50 hours a month. That is an auxiliary pioneer. So Jehovah's Witnesses don't have no pioneers. They just have a whole bunch of auxiliary pioneers, and that's if they get a lot of people to do the 50 hours. So you don't get to go out and come and say that a pioneer is a person who spends a great deal of time knocking on doors, trying to talk to people, trying to preach to people. And an auxiliary pioneer is a person who does 50 hours. That's what that is. And then change it. You don't get to keep changing the definition of what a pioneer is. Y'all can't make up your mind as to what a pioneer even is. A pioneer was a person who did 90 hours back when I was coming up. You lowered it to 70, I believe. I'm like, okay, you lowered it to 70. But an auxiliary pioneer is a person who did 50 for years. For like the last 10, 20, I don't know how many years. That's an auxiliary pioneer, a person who does 50. So a Watchtower lowered the requirement to 50, meaning they ain't getting nobody doing pioneer hours. They only have people that'll do auxiliary pioneer hours. Watchtower, you just have a bunch of auxiliary pioneers. You are declining to such an extent that not only are you selling kingdom halls and consolidating people versus filling halls and building more, now you don't have any pioneers anymore. It's not that Watchtower can't figure out what a pioneer is. It's not that, people are they want to work full time and pioneer. It's none of that, because if Jehovah gave the commission to go out and preach 90 hours because the end of the world was coming, and it is so pertinent that you go out and you preach and you do it for 90 hours and you make sure to cover the whole territory and get everybody. If God gave you that commission, you would be able to carry it out. God would make a way so that the people carrying it out would have the food, the sustenance, the things that they need. Watchtower has preached this for eons. Watchtower has preached this for 100 years. That if you pioneer whole-souled for the organization, Jehovah will then supply you with what other things you need. If that's true, you don't need to lower the hourly requirement. It makes no sense to lower the hourly requirement, because God is going to give the people doing 90 hours what they need to do the 90 hours. And the organization, Jehovah's Witnesses, are shrinking. They're not growing. So from that aspect too, it does not make sense to lower production. So we are watching the demise, the slow death of Watchtower. We're watching Watchtower on its deathbed, reeling and rolling in agony as they hemorrhage members, they lose members, they hemorrhage money because of all the sex abuse scandals, the child sex abuse scandals. And now they don't have any more pioneers. The only thing they have is auxiliary pioneers. Now, Sanderson got on a broadcast and thought he could trick everybody into thinking 50 hours was a regular pioneer. No, we all know Sanderson, who, by the way, needs to, get on a treadmill, do some exercise. He's almost to the point where he won't fit in the screen for the broadcast. But we all know, Sanderson, that 50 hours is auxiliary. 90 or 70, y'all gotta make up your mind, is a pioneer. 50 hours is not a pioneer. You guys do not have any more pioneers. Watchtower has literally eliminated the pioneer and tried to trick us all into thinking an auxiliary pioneer is a regular pioneer. 937-789-4029. We'll discuss it, but you don't have any clearer evidence. If somebody would have told me 10 years from now, 10 years in the past, if someone would have told me, well, Watchtower will no longer have pioneers. The only thing they'll have is auxiliary. They'll drop everything down to auxiliary. I would not have believed you. I would have said Watchtower can't drop it down to auxiliary and get rid of all the pioneers because they've taught us for 100 years that Jehovah God will provide what is needed so that the preaching work could be carried out at the hourly requirements it currently was at, which was 90 hours. So dropping it to 70 was a big deal. Dropping it all together to auxiliary hours. If your relative tells you they're a pioneer, tell them the truth to their face. No, you're an auxiliary pioneer, buddy. Y'all don't have any pioneers anymore. All of y'all are a bunch of auxiliaries. So enjoy this time period we are living in where we get to just watch Watchtower crumble to pieces. It's just so sweet to watch Watchtower crumble to pieces and watch the governing body. They're so old, they're so ancient. They're about to die, and it would then make no sense to appoint more governing body members because you're supposed to be at the end of the system of things. Weren't you at the last day of the last minute of the last second of the last days? Well, your governing body's about to die out. You keep selling kingdom halls. You done got rid of the whole pioneer arrangement. Now you just got a bunch of auxiliary pioneers. That's the standard. That's the standard. Sanderson's trying to play with words, but that's the standard. 50 hours. 50 hours is auxiliary. 30 hours ain't nothing. 30 hours is nothing. God, Jehovah, does not lower his standards, right? So comment down below. Let me know what you think. But Jehovah God is not leading or guiding or using the Jehovah Witness Watchtower organization. It is a cult. And that cult is crumbling. X-Wall Kill Bethelite signing out.